morning, people of God. This is Family Altar Forum 170, and we are talking about the church. The church. What is the church? What is the meaning of the word church? In podcast 159, we talked about three main institutions that God established. And we have been seeing the institution of family, which is a social unit that God established so as to fulfill and pursue his mission on the earth. But also we have seen how family dismally has failed to exercise the authority that was God given to the initial family members and subsequent families that followed. Yeah, we have talked about the family in different aspects, and I urge you to go to the YouTube and you'll be able to access about 10 podcasts about the family. And today we would want to focus on the second institution that God established. After God established a family to fulfill his mission and the family failed, God never failed in his mission. God went ahead to institute what is referred to as church. And today we majorly want to see what is the meaning of the church. And then in subsequent podcast, we are going to talk in details about what constitutes church. So today we just start on basics of what the church is. And there are things that are considered to be church today, but they are not church. Maybe we need to begin by saying what is not church? What is not church? Or what we consider to be church, but it is unbiblical. It has no biblical foundation. It has no scriptural backup for what we refer church to be. Number one, we normally say that church is a building. When we see a building where there are spiritual functions that are taken up in there, we consider that to be church. But often a building is simply called a church. In the New Testament times, buildings were not normally used as church worship centers. That is in Christianity. But of course, in Judaism, the religion of the Jews, they would meet in the temple, and there was only one temple in Jerusalem, whereby the children of Israel will go there mainly thrice in a year, during the Passover feast celebration and during Pentecost celebration and during tabernacle celebrations. But there before or there in between those feasts and festivals, possibly the church would be the temple would be used for gathering of religious activities. But those were the main three occasions that all Israel male would go to Jerusalem, and that is found in the book of Leviticus chapter 23 and Exodus chapter 23 as well, and Deuteronomy chapter 16. We shall deal with that later. But what we are saying here is that Judaists would meet normally in synagogues, but we are not talking about church focused on Judaism. We are talking about church focused on what we know as church in the New Testament, since Jesus Christ came up to where we are now. So mainly the New Testament was meeting in homes. It was meeting in homes for prayer, for fellowship, for edification, for worship. So a building is not a church. A building is not a church. So that is a misnomer. When we say that is a church and we are pointing to a building, that is not right. Then the other meaning that is construed to mean church is a denomination, right? A denomination or a sect in Christianity is very much referred to be as church, like the Roman Catholic Church or like this mainstream church. That is not what constitutes church. There is a more stricter meaning to what a church is. So a church is not the church. Let me say the church. The church is not the building. The church is not what we normally refer to, but church has its own deeper meaning and original meaning than the meaning that we have popularly referred church to mean. Let's define what the word church is, and by us doing this, we will go to Greek a little bit, and the common Greek word for the church is ecclesia. Ecclesia, 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 and ecclesia comes from two smaller words, and the first one is ek or ek, which means out of. Ek means out of. Then the other word is klesia, which means called, Therefore, the word church, which is ecclesia in Greek, means called out of. So when we strictly talk about church, we are talking about an organ or organism that is called out of into something. Originally, it referred to a group of men who were called out of their homes, or called out of their places of work, and they are called out from their home, and they are called out of their work to assemble. When they are called out from wherever one is coming out of, and they are gathered, then that is what a church is. That's what the church is. The church refers to people who are called out of their works, their homes, their businesses into something that is different from what they are doing. That is what the church is. That's what the word ecclesia, which is translated the church, means. They would meet to solve community problems. When these people are called out of their homes and their places, they would gather to solve community problems. They would even gather to worship the Lord, and we are going to see that in the Old Testament. They would come and be a community from what they have been in the places that they have been called out of. Remember, the meaning of ecclesia is called out of. They are called out of many things that they are doing into a special community, into a special assembly, into a special meeting, into a special congregation, into a special gathering to execute a spiritual undertaking. And mostly they would as well solve out community problems. The church, therefore, consists of people who have been called out of. If you have not been called out of, then you cannot make out the church, or you cannot constitute the church, because the church are those who have been called out, maybe of sin, maybe from the world, maybe from your home, maybe from your own self, maybe from your place of work. Church is made up of people that have been called out of. You have to be called out from something. You have to live out something. You have to live out something, meaning that you have to sacrifice where you are coming from. You detach yourself, or you come out of whatever it is for you to be able to form or to constitute the church. This is very critical, brethren, and we need to understand it. Because if we fail to understand it, we will keep on confusing what church is. In strict terms, church is those that gather together and they have been called out. They have been selected from a thing into a thing. So this thing that is now formed by those that have come out is what is referred to as church. So church is a very important organ, and this was actually done by God himself when he called his own people, right? In Jeremiah chapter 3 and verse 14, Jeremiah chapter 3 and verse 14, I want to focus on B, but let's read all of it. Turn, O backsliding children, saith the Lord, for I am married unto you, and I will take you, one of a city, two of a family, and I will bring you to Zion. God was talking to Judah of how he had had a relationship with Judah, of how he was the husband of Judah, and how he would take one of a city, that is one from a city, and two of a family, called out once, and would bring them to Zion, that is to Jerusalem. And I will give you pastors according to mine heart. We shall feed you with knowledge and understanding. So God was to call out one of a city and two of a family. Remember, we are talking about being called out of a city, being called out of a family, and God will bring them to Zion. For what? For a spiritual activity, for a defined function, for a defined purpose. And then what will God do? He says, and I will give you pastors according to mine heart. We shall feed you with knowledge and understanding. We see the practicality of this, but in the next broadcast we'll see that in greater details. We are just read that scripture to demonstrate that the church is the called out ones. And we have seen in the time of Jeremiah, God will call one, or God called one of a city and two of a family into a different institution altogether. So right there you see God establishing church from family, because the family failed to execute the mission of God. So they assemble for a common spiritual purpose. That's what the church is. The church is made up of called out of ones. So if you have not been called out one from something into this assembly, you cannot make the church. You remember in the book of Matthew and Mark, Jesus Christ found these fishermen and he called them out of what? They were doing their business. Peter, John, and sons of Zebedee, they were doing their business. And while they were washing their nets, and while they were fishing, God called them out of their business to do his business. That's what the church is, that you have to be called out. And when you are called out from your business and you follow the Lord and you do his will, then there will be something special. In Matthew chapter 3 and verse 18, and Jesus walking by the Sea of Galilee saw two brethren, Simon called Peter and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishers. And he said unto them, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. Until we meet tomorrow, this is John Joe Elias. Maranatha. God bless you.